The Stagecoach and the Stranger. The Montana sun was still climbing when Ethan Callahan rode into town. His horse's hooves struck the dry earth in a steady rhythm, scattering dust in the morning air. He didn't often come to town, but today was no ordinary day. The letter he had received 3 weeks ago was folded neatly in his shirt pocket, worn soft from the number of times he'd read it. A woman, a stranger, had agreed to marry him. He hadn't asked for beauty or romance. He'd asked for a partner, someone who wouldn't mind cooking, keeping the house, maybe even sharing quiet evenings with him by the fire. Ethan had spent most of his life alone on the ranch, working from dawn until the stars came out. The silence was starting to feel heavier each winter. Today, if all went according to plan, that silence might finally break. The town was already waking up. A few shopkeepers were sweeping their porches. The blacksmith's hammer rang in the distance. A couple of cowboys leaned against the rail outside the saloon, giving Ethan a nod as he passed. He dismounted near the stagecoach stop and tied his horse to the hitching post. The station was quiet except for the sound of a lone chicken scratching at the dust. Ethan pushed his hat lower on his brow and waited, his rough hands restless at his sides. He was no stranger to hard work, but waiting made him feel like a green boy. When the stagecoach finally came, he heard it before he saw it, the clatter of wheels, the sharp crack of the driver's whip, the cloud of dust rising behind it. Ethan's heart thudded against his ribs as the coach rolled to a stop in front of the station. One by one, passengers climbed down, a traveling salesman, a family with 2 small children, a woman carrying a birdcage, and then she appeared. Clara Bennett. She stepped down carefully, gathering her skirts so they wouldn't catch on the wheel. Her hair glinted auburn in the sun, catching Ethan's breath off guard. She was not what he expected. Not at all. Her dress was simple but well-made, the pale fabric catching the light. Her face was delicate, her posture proud. And her eyes, green as the new spring grass, met his without hesitation. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to speak. "Mr. Callahan?" she asked, her voice soft but sure. He cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how dusty and rough he must look. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Ethan Callahan." Clara smiled, a warm, quiet smile that made something shift in his chest. "I'm Clara," she said. She held out a yellow envelope, the letter she had carried all the way from St. Louis, proof of the agreement they had made. Ethan took it, his fingers brushing hers for a brief second. He swallowed hard. "Stage ride treat you well?" he asked, feeling clumsy. "As well as it could," Clara replied gently. She glanced around the small town, then back to Ethan. "Is your ranch far from here?" "Couple of hours by wagon," Ethan said. "I brought one. We can leave when you're ready." "I'm ready," Clara said without hesitation. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking over the rough dirt road. Clara's gloved hands rested on her lap, the envelope now tucked away. Ethan stole glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. She seemed calm, but her eyes were taking in everything, the rolling hills, the distant mountains, the endless sky. "You ain't nervous?" Ethan asked finally. Clara turned to him, her lips curving just slightly. "I've traveled hundreds of miles to be here, Mr. Callahan. If I was nervous, I wouldn't have come." Ethan nodded, but said nothing more. When they reached the ranch, Clara stepped down from the wagon and looked around. The house stood sturdy against the wide sky, the barn behind it, and pastures stretching as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ethan's chest tightened. Most folks said it was lonely. "You think so?" he asked. Clara looked at him, her eyes steady. "I think it looks like a place where someone could build a life." That night, after Clara had gone to her room, Ethan sat on the porch with his hat in his lap. He had expected a plain, practical woman. Someone who wouldn't scare him with how easy it was to look at her, or how badly he already wanted to keep her safe. But this woman, this Clara Bennett, was going to change everything. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt both fear and hope, burning side by side in his chest. Storms on the horizon. Clara woke before dawn her first morning on the ranch. The air was cool and still, the sky a soft gray before sunrise. She dressed quietly and stepped outside, breathing in the scent of wild sage and clean earth. The house was quiet except for the faint creak of floorboards as Ethan moved about. She could hear him in the barn, the muffled sound of a horse snorting, the scrape of a pitchfork. Clara smiled faintly. She had grown up in a city where mornings were filled with noise, wagon wheels, vendors shouting, the clang of bells. This quiet, this open space, felt strange but good. She walked toward the barn, her skirts brushing against the damp grass. Ethan stood near the stalls, his sleeves rolled up, his strong forearms dusted with hay. He glanced up when he saw her. "You're up early," he said gruffly. "I thought I'd help," Clara replied. Ethan hesitated. "You don't have to. Not on your first day." Clara tilted her head. "Do you not want help?" Ethan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Ain't used to having it," he admitted. Clara stepped closer. "Well, you'll have to get used to me." Something softened in his expression. "Reckon I will." Over the next few days, Clara settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She swept and cooked, learned to gather eggs, and even followed Ethan to the pasture to watch him mend a section of fence. She was not delicate, not the way Ethan had feared. Her hands blistered from work, but she did not complain. When the wind whipped dust into her face, she only laughed and tucked her hair behind her ear. And yet, every time Ethan looked at her, he felt the same twist in his chest. She was too fine for him. He told himself he wouldn't get attached. Not yet. They hadn't even spoken about vows or signing papers. But each night, when he sat on the porch and saw the lamplight glowing from her window, he found himself wishing she'd come sit with him. One afternoon, while Ethan was out checking the herd, Clara was kneeling by the garden when she heard hoofbeats. She stood, wiping dirt from her hands, as a stranger rode up. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his shirt clean, his hat tipped back in a way that spoke of confidence. "Well now," he drawled, dismounting smoothly. "You must be the new lady here." Clara nodded politely. "I'm Clara Bennett." The man grinned. "Name's Cole Trask. Neighbor of sorts, got the ranch just over the ridge. Came by to see if Callahan needed any help with the south fence." Clara felt a small prickle of unease at the way his eyes lingered on her. "Ethan's out by the herd," she said. "He should be back soon." Cole's grin widened. "Then I reckon I'll wait. If you don't mind the company." Clara hesitated, then gestured toward the porch. "You can sit." By the time Ethan returned, Cole was leaning against the porch rail, talking easily with Clara. Ethan's jaw tightened at the sight. He dismounted slowly, his eyes on Cole. "Didn't expect to see you here," Ethan said flatly. Cole tipped his hat. "Just being neighborly. Heard the stage brought someone special to your place. Thought I'd welcome her proper." Ethan's eyes flicked to Clara, who looked suddenly uneasy. "She don't need welcoming," Ethan said, his voice low. Cole's smile turned sharp. "Reckon that's for her to say, ain't it?" For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other. Clara felt the air between them thicken, charged like the sky before a storm. "I think," Clara said gently, "Mr. Trask was just leaving." Cole chuckled, not offended. "If the lady says so." He tipped his hat again and swung into the saddle. "See you around, Callahan." When he was gone, Ethan turned to Clara. "You don't want to be alone with that man," he said, harsher than he meant. Clara's chin lifted. "He was polite." "He was lookin'," Ethan muttered. "And what if he was?" Clara asked, heat rising in her voice. "Do you think I came all this way just to run off with the first man who smiles at me?" Ethan flinched. "Didn't mean it like that." Clara's anger softened, but she still held his gaze. "Then say what you do mean." Ethan's throat worked. He wanted to tell her everything, how the sight of Cole standing so close to her had made something wild rise up in him, how he was scared she'd see what kind of man he really was, quiet, rough, unpolished, and decide she deserved better. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he muttered, "Just don't trust him." Then he walked toward the barn, leaving Clara standing on the porch with her heart thudding. That night, the first storm of spring rolled in. The sky turned black, thunder growling low over the hills. Clara stood at the window, watching lightning split the horizon. The house felt too big, too empty. Then she heard a knock on her door. "Clara." Ethan's voice was quiet. "Yes." He hesitated. "Storm's gonna be bad. Best you stay downstairs tonight. Safer near the hearth." Clara wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and came down. Ethan was already stoking the fire, the flicker of light catching the hard planes of his face. They sat together in silence as the wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low. "I ain't good at this. Talking. Feeling. But today, when I saw him standing there," he broke off, his jaw tight. "I didn't like it. Not 'cause I don't trust you, but because—" Clara waited, her heart pounding. "Because you're here," Ethan said roughly. "And I reckon I want you to stay. With me. Not because of the papers. Not because you said you would. But because you want to." Clara's breath caught. She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing the calluses there. "I am here because I want to be," she said softly. For a long moment, they just sat there, the storm raging outside but something warm and steady growing between them. When the thunder finally quieted, Clara rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a man keeping a ranch alive. He was a man with something, someone worth fighting for.